Even if a council or a parking company has a legal right to charge you, there are ways of avoiding paying, and in this video, I'll show you how. This is one of a series of videos I've made to help you understand how to challenge a parking ticket. I've recorded other videos, the links are below in the show notes, explaining the formal grounds of appealing a council or a private company ticket. But what happens if your appeal doesn't succeed and your excuse doesn't fit into one of the clearly delineated categories? Well, you may still be able to persuade the council or the private company not to chase the fine. And in this video, I'll be looking at the sort of things that might just convince them to let you off. I'm Daniel Barnett, a barrister based in London and presenter of the Legal Hour on LBC Radio. What we're dealing with in this video is referred to in legislation and by parking appeal bodies in different ways. The legislation that regulates challenges to parking fines by councils or public bodies, the Civil Enforcement of Parking Contraventions England Representation and Appeal Regulations 2007, quite a mouthful, talks about compelling reasons why, in the particular circumstances of the case, the enforcement authority should cancel the penalty charge and refund any sum paid to it on account of the penalty charge. Private parking bodies refer to these as mitigating circumstances or just as mitigation. Whichever term is used, the concept is the same. Circumstances that provide a compelling reason for the fine not to be enforced, even though the body that fined you has had a legal right to payment and your formal appeals have failed. Now, there are three characteristics of mitigating circumstances. First of all, there's no limit to what might count as mitigating circumstances. You can put forward any reason you want, though in practice, one that's persuasive enough for your ticket to be cancelled is likely to fall into one of the categories I'm going to look at in just a moment. Second, a mitigating circumstance never gives you a legal right to have your ticket cancelled. You're at the mercy of the organisation that issued the ticket, however strong your reason. If you can show your ticket was legally invalid, that there's no legal right to enforce it, this will almost certainly provide a better means of challenging your ticket than mitigating circumstances. So again, look at the videos below for the legal routes to appeal. Third, and linked to the second, it means whether your excuse will work can be unpredictable. Many councils, many parking companies keep their decision-making process under wraps, and very often it's just down to the mood of the individual on the day. Fortunately, there are guidelines which give a good sense of when a challenge will be hopeless and equally when it's likely to succeed. I've provided links for some of the guidelines below so you can see for yourself the considerations that are likely to be in play. A key theme that emerges from council guidance is that if there's no evidence to support your challenge, it's unlikely to succeed. Whatever your circumstances, try to provide some support for it, such as the doctor's note if you were taken ill, or a receipt for repairs if your car broke down. That's especially true of one important category of mitigating circumstances: medical conditions. With proof, a medical condition will often provide good grounds for a challenge. Two examples often cited in guidance used by councils are becoming unwell after parking and needing to stop to use a toilet because of a medical condition. It's crucial to send in proof of your medical condition and whether it's severe enough to justify your actions. Without medical evidence, you're unlikely to get your ticket cancelled because if it was that easy, no one would ever have to pay a parking fine. There may also be good grounds to dispute a ticket if you've had to park for a medical appointment or to pick up medicines from a chemist, provided you can prove it was urgent and there were no legal parking spaces that you could reasonably have used. If you were visiting a friend or a relative in an emergency, guidance suggests that might also provide a good reason to set aside the ticket, although whether you succeed is likely to depend on whether the incident is sufficiently exceptional. Needing to drop off a child or a disabled or elderly person might also be an acceptable reason, depending on how exceptional the circumstances were. Dropping your 7-year-old off at their best friend's party and parking unlawfully won't be a good excuse because, frankly, the council will say you could have taken a bit more time and walked a little bit further. But what if you couldn't get back to your car before your parking time expired? Now, the criteria used in the published guidance are that the circumstances behind the delay must have been unforeseen, unavoidable, and exceptional. That's unlikely to be the case if you've simply mistimed a visit to the shops, but if you've gone into labour unexpectedly or had to deal with an unforeseen emergency, then you'll have a decent chance. A vehicle breakdown, or even attending another vehicle breakdown to help somebody out, is likely to be a good basis for a challenge, provided the breakdown wasn't your fault, for example, because you ran out of petrol. Stepping away from your vehicle to get change used to be a basis for cancelling your fine, but guidance suggested that will generally only be entertained if you hadn't left the car park or the on-street parking area. Since, however, most parking bays are now operated by phone or by app, that's unlikely to be a good enough excuse unless you can prove you don't have a phone. Similarly, being unaware of a new restriction or a charge could provide a good grounds for a challenge, but remember, it's a matter of discretion whether a fine will be waived in those circumstances, and if you've been let off before on this basis, you're unlikely to be treated leniently the second time. Finally, there are some excuses that are likely to be rejected out of hand in almost all circumstances, such as stopping to answer your mobile phone. Next, I'm talking about appeals and mitigating circumstances, but before I do so, if you haven't already done so, would you mind just subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification bell? It really helps the YouTube algorithm find my other videos, and that will give you a subscription to all my Legal Explainer videos. I'll give you 4 seconds in which to do it if you wouldn't mind. No problem if you don't. 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. It's important to remember the formal appeal bodies don't have the power to allow an appeal based on mitigating circumstances. The most they can do is make a recommendation to the body that actually issued the parking fine. If your ticket was issued by a private parking company, the relevant appeal body where you go for formal appeals is POPLA, Parking on Private Land Appeals, or sometimes IAS, the Independent Appeal Service. It always says which one on the back of your ticket. POPLA says it asked parking operators to reconsider fines on grounds of mitigating circumstances just over 1,000 times last year, but in 2/3 of cases, the recommendation was ignored. The Independent Appeal Service doesn't expressly entertain appeals based on mitigating circumstances, but says its adjudicators can make confidential recommendations to an operator to reconsider a fine where they think it's warranted. Whether tickets issued by council or by Transport for London, the appeal body, in this case the Traffic Penalty Tribunal or London Tribunals, is also unable to order the ticket to be cancelled, however strong your mitigating circumstances. But it can ask the relevant authority to reconsider its decision to fine you, and if the authority doesn't do so, it has to give reasons. There are no published statistics on how often councils cancel a fine after a request to reconsider, but it's reasonable to assume the proportions are similar to those in private appeals. I'm Daniel Barnett. Thank you for watching and best of luck with your appeal. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and here is a video that you might find interesting. Bye bye.